Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it. As always, it's good to sit down with you today. And please, if you're watching this on YouTube, hit those like and subscribe buttons. I'll like it if you subscribe. Today, we've got a great guest, a mover and a shaker in the real estate appraisal industry, as well, quite frankly, as in the brokerage industry, something we don't get into much in these podcasts. But today we've got Marty Wagar with us. Now, Marty brings a very deep and varied background to real estate appraisal and even brokerage. Marty has been an appraiser for many years. He's been a broker for many years. At one time, he was on the Michigan Appraisal Board. I think he was on there for 3 years. He is on the appraiser or the NAR's appraisal panel. So he influences appraisal there. At one time, he owned an AMC. Now he does a lot of writing and a lot of teaching for both appraisers and brokers. And he also plays a lot of golf, which is probably the best part, because Marty is sometimes because Marty is semi-retired. Although, just so everybody knows, Marty still gets out and puts boots in living rooms to do real estate appraisals. So he is truly an appraiser, and he is truly someone who is connected with what's going on and connected all over the country. And of course, we've got Marty here because he brings a 10,000-foot view to real estate appraisal, because he's outside of the trees so he can see the forest. So Marty, welcome. How are you this morning?
I am very good. Thank you.
I appreciate you being here, Marty. Thank you very much. Now, just so everybody knows, well, these things are generally spontaneous. We have gone over some questions. And the first question I'm going to ask you, Marty, is a general question. Given the state of real estate appraisal, given what recently happened in real estate brokerage with the decision of the court in Missouri, what is it, or what are they, that keep you awake at night relative to real estate appraisal and what is going to happen in the future?
Appreciate the introduction and the accolades. Some of it's penance, some of it is giving back, and I thoroughly enjoy all of it. Your question, what keeps me up at night? First, very little keeps me awake at night. Thank God I sleep like a baby most of the time. When it comes to the specific to the real estate appraisal portion of what keeps me up at night, there's a couple things, and I don't know which is more important than others. But probably my first concern is the concern over our federal government having $13 trillion in debt and $10 trillion in collateral at the end of the day. Fannie Mae was bailed out. Freddie Mac was bailed out. I'm not sure where you go from there if that goes upside down again, and everything that goes with that. How do we get there? How do we make sure that we stay on the right side of that? 2006, 7, and 8 should have taught us, or did teach us, many of us, something, and that's that property values can go south. They don't always go north. If you've watched The Big Short, you can see that one of the biggest pushbacks that the issues of the day were nobody would believe that you could short the real estate industry. It doesn't go down. I don't understand. But deeper than that, are the reasons. I'm probably secondly concerned with the complete and total influence that the federal government has in exercising backstopping mortgages. And don't get me wrong, I am a firm believer in the federal government is needed to backstop mortgages. I believe that is the smartest thing to do. Should they have complete and total and utter control over it, that makes me queasy. It makes me queasy when any mortgage that you get today that is backstopped has to undergo the policy of written by the federal government. Prior to 2006-7, the federal government did not own. They owned some of Fannie Mae, as I remember. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tim. But I'm remembering that it was somewhere around 11% at one time, and Fannie Mae was private. And there was a push. There has been a push in the federal government to have Fannie privatized again, and it's just something it would take my queasiness away. Probably the third thing is the dynamics of the shift, the paradigm shift to quicker is better. Seems that programs are being written today under the guise of this is quicker and it's better. And I do want to say one thing, and it was a quote I heard a while ago, and the quote is, "Progress is not always forward. History defines what progress is." There are countless examples through history that were thought of as progress. It turned out not so much. Some of it was, and some of it wasn't. I'm a huge supporter of modernization. When I teach, I had a student ask me the other day, "Marty, come on, we really don't need this, do we? And I said, look at the bottom of your form, your appraisal form. It says 2005. If you believe that 1 year is worth 3 in the technology field, then you have something that's well over 50 years old. We need to modernize, and I'm also a firm believer, doing the research that I've been doing to see how the system is going to be revamped. Everything so far that I see, has good foundation. The appraisal programs that exist today, many exist in the cloud. It's easier for everyone. Probably down the line, when I still can't sleep, it is what is being encompassed under the guise of the term modernization. The modernization that I see that's good, and this certainly is my opinion, is good, are the technological advances, the one-size-fits-all form, the ability for the loan officer, the underwriter, the appraiser, all to get into the same file and share it. I think that's I think that's a good thing. I'm not sure that including the different formats, in other words, the desktop, the hybrid, the appraisal waivers come under modernization. They might, but it's a different dynamic. I think that I can support an awful lot of Fannie and Freddie's both concepts of we need, years ago, this is maybe 16, 17, when I was paying attention then, Fannie was making comments, we need to get more toward risk-based lending. And that reminds me of, the credit lending and collateral lending, and this kind of does both. But the idea that an appraiser needs to do a full 28-page form on somebody who has an 800 credit score and has been in the house 20 years and has 20-year job time, and he's borrowing $10,000. The idea that they need an appraisal, I certainly agree. They don't need me. It's risk-based, and they understand that. It can get carried too far. So those are some of the things that keep me up. And there's a lot of sacred cows in when you talk to appraisers. Well, we can't do this and we can't do that, and you hear from appraisers and you hear it all the time. That's the way I've been doing it. So it must be good and it must be right. And so there's a lot of sacred cows. And one of the guys I used to teach with used to have a saying, and he says, many times sacred cows are best when eaten. And I think that's probably the case. There's going to be a lot of eating going on, as we modernize things that you did before, you won't do again. But that said, you reach a fine line between where do you shift from going too fast. At one point, 70 miles on the highway is okay. 80 miles on the highway is okay. 90 is risky. At one point, it becomes you become going too fast, becomes risky, and that's my probably my biggest concern. As an appraiser, I think it's a personal decision as to whether you do the hybrids and the desktops. There are appraisers who are using probably I don't want to say false accusations, but they don't understand a lot of what their liability is in desktops and hybrids. I'm queasy about both of them. When I read through the certification limiting conditions, it appears to me that you are covered. Being on the state board for 3 years, I'm not so sure. I don't think we have a case yet, and I could be wrong, but I don't think we have a case yet in front of a board where they've been tested. In other words, where the appraiser was exonerated because the third-party property data collection information was incorrect and not checked. Things like that are probably going to happen. And probably, and we talked about this before, and some of the fundamentals I've been preaching on for ever since I heard the term stakeholders. I am in the camp that believes the stakeholders, Fannie and Freddie call the stakeholders the lenders. And while I understand how they think that and how that can be true, my belief is ultimately I believe the stakeholders are the taxpayers, because if things go south, if we have $13 trillion in mortgages and $10 trillion in collateral, it will be the taxpayers who put the bill for that. So those, you'd think I'd been up all night thinking about all that, but there's down the line, you teach and I teach, and probably another concern of mine is the lack of some appraisers to adapt. We have a client, and I have been corrected many times in the past that Fannie is not my client, but Fannie is the one who tells our client what they want. So I kind of consider them a client. So when Fannie tells one of your clients, one of your lenders, how they want the appraisal to read, that's what you do. And I'm sure as a commercial appraiser, if somebody comes to you and says, okay, I would like you to do this appraisal. Well, the Michigan Department of Highways, for instance, here, hire appraisers, and they tell the appraisers exactly what they want how they want that appraiser to look, how they want that appraisal to look specifically. And you just have to decide it as an appraiser that I can do that or I can't do that. If somebody says, I want you to appraise an 800-unit apartment complex, but don't use the income approach, at one point you go, that I can't do that. Or you sit down and figure out a way that you can. We have a gorilla in the room, and being Fannie Mae, that says, okay, this is what we want. Appraisers have to adapt. Now they might want to adapt, they might not want to adapt, but at one point they have to start looking at I can do this, but this is how I'm going to do it. The new form that I'm seeing, apparently you can do a cost approach, but it's not like it is in the old form. And certainly all the USPAP issues about explaining what approaches you abandon and which ones you don't. I'm still unclear, and I'm still doing research right now on the input section, of that form. So you know, the growing chasm between appraisers and clients makes me nervous. You do what you as an appraiser, if you have a client come to you and said, okay, this is the format that I'd like you to use, you have to decide to use it or not use it. So and I have been quoted as saying many times in the last year, or I think last year at the NAA meeting, we talked about the tools that are out there. They're not replacements for the gray matter between the ears of the appraisers. They're tools, algorithms that are out there. You know, being a USPAP instructor, the first thing the appraiser is told, did you understand the algorithm that you used? And if the appraiser didn't understand it, just using an algorithm is not enough. You have to understand it. The measuring tools that we have today, an appraiser would be foolish not to research them and understand whether he or she wants to use them or not. There are times when the tools are excellent in the trade and usable, but they're not replacements for what we do. They're tools. So in a nutshell, that's what keeps me up at night, but not very much, and not very often, because Tuesdays and Thursdays are golf days, and I need all my skills to be able to play average, so anything else? You had mentioned the NAR issue. I'm happy to talk about that for a minute. Mine isn't a 10,000 view, and it's controversial, but I'll go there. The Justice Department for a long time has wanted control over MLSs. And I asked you the other day, and I did find the answer. Where is the cooperation and compensation clause? Is it in the, and I did find out it is in the MLSs. And I think if this goes the way it could, and I have no clue one way or the other how this is going to turn out. But I see the biggest change is the MLS.
Marty, let me interrupt just quickly.
Please.
Can you give us a thumbnail summary of this particular decision and what the issues were? Because not everybody who's watching this is going to be as up to date on it as you are.
Well, I think from what I have read, as my understanding is the antitrust and the idea that the wrong person's paying the commission, and that the commission is set. The commission is somehow being manipulated at a certain level. When you walk into a property, many times the buyer and seller don't know who's paying the commission. In other words, the buyer the buyer doesn't understand that the seller's paying the commission, that they're being paid by the homeowner. And it is incredibly complicated. I've spent more time than I should have trying to understand it. But at the 50,000 foot level, I believe some of the concepts that you and I talked about that revolve around a manipulation of the commission, as quote unquote agreed to by members of NAR. That's my understanding, and it could be I'm sure it's deeper than that. They didn't spend however many days in the trial discussing it, just over that. So, but I believe that 100 years ago, when you were buying and selling houses, there were evildoers who would list it for one thing and buy it and resell it, kind of like an appraiser who does an appraisal on a house, and before he or she finishes it, decides they want to buy it. You see that on Antiques Roadshow all the time, where somebody says, "Yeah, I took it to an appraiser, and they offered to buy it." And the people on Antiques Roadshow said they can't do that. So there are and were evildoers out there, still are. And I believe that as an appraiser, I think I'm just going to get my data different. That's my opinion. I'm curious to hear yours. So
I let's see, what is that saying on one of our favorite TV shows, Bosch? When in a pickle, plead the nickel. In other words, go for the fifth so you don't have to incriminate yourself.
yeah,
All right. Let's back up to $13 trillion in debt and $10 trillion in collateral.
yeah.
In other words, somewhere there isn't $3 trillion. All right, two questions. Number one, what, if anything, did appraisers have to do with this imbalance? And number two, what, if anything, will appraisal modernization do to find this $3 trillion and therefore return the debt to collateral ratio to 1-to-1?
Good question. The chasm between the two, the void between the two, gets there very slowly. It can either get there by not paying attention to what you're lending against, or you can go there the way we did in 07, 08, and with the belief that real estate doesn't ever go down. We're covered. Mortgage-backed securities are the best and finest thing you could ever invest in. I think, and I might have said this before, but the movement toward quicker is better is true in some things, not true in others. And whether that's progress or not, we'll find out whether it is. Progress was defined in 06, 07 by no doc loans, by we should get everybody we possibly can into a house and have ownership and get up more towards the 75-80% level. I think we're in the 60-some% range now. And that was the concept. While that was seen as progress, turns out it really wasn't. Not everybody should own a house. So when you got there, and that was kind of a perfect storm. But to answer your question, if you start if you stop looking at the collateral and concentrate on only how many people are going to, how many loans am I going to do this year? How many people can I put in the house? And you don't pay attention to the collateral. You start building the chasm between what the property is worth and what you have for collateral and what you have out there for a loan. And that, I said before, that makes me queasy. I do not believe that that AVMs and all the algorithms and everything they have, I believe they do have their place. They're tools. And in some cases where, like Fanny said, you have a 50% loan to value ratio, you have all the pointers. I really don't need collateral. The appraiser is not out there, and this is what you and I both find when we do teaching. There are appraisers out there who believe that we quote unquote set values, that we help control values. And I had a serious discussion with a gentleman who told the class that that's what he thought. That is not our job. Our job, when you talk to agents, is to interpret what they do between buyers and sellers. That's what we do. We don't set values, and we don't have the God-given right. Let me rephrase that. We don't have our position in the mortgage appraisal is not to provide substance to the buyer that the property is worth, that I believe the property is worth that. And there are appraisers who believe, well, if you take us out of the equation, you're going to hurt the buyer. And when you say that, you forget about the client. Your client is lending on it. They're asking you, should I lend on this? Your value might or might not agree with the sale price, but your client, the reason you're doing that is for the collateral. And I think a lot of appraisers misinterpret why they're doing what they're doing. So when Fannie Mae comes out and says, we're not going to do an appraisal on everyone, they think, well, you're going to hurt the seller. Well, it's not being done for the buyer or seller. It's being done for the lender. And if the lender decides, I'm going to loan on this without the value, without an appraisal, then that's on me. The problem when we fly up a little further is, yeah, but you're getting your money from my taxes. You're the 13 trillion that you're backing. If that goes south, the only place you're going to get it is from the 350 some million people in the world, and however many of those are taxpayers. We got to make this up somehow. That's a long answer to your question.
No, I'm fine answer. Marty, modernization. Okay. That encompasses a lot of areas. Now, well, the GSEs are still not sure when the new appraisal, I'm not going to call it appraisal form because that's not what it is, but the new appraisal formatting comes out. And it's minimum 2025, maybe 2026. It's going to be different. Now, you and I grew up in a culture where you sat down at your desk and you pulled a legal-sized appraisal reporting form off the forms and worms pad, and you rolled it into the typewriter and you started typing. And even when even when programs came out, you still brought up a blank form and started filling it out. But when I call it UAD3 for lack of a better term, when UAD3 comes out, no, you're not even going to see the form because the computer itself is going to generate the form once you fill in the data that it needs to fill the form in. And this is going to be in Excel. And while you're not going to have to learn how to code in Excel, you are going to have to learn how to format in Excel. And this is something with which, those of us who type with two fingers, we can get along on the typewriter. It just takes us a little while. Where, okay, now you have to learn how to format. Now, I've spoken with appraisers, and appraisers younger than you and I are, Marty. Of course, most appraisers are younger than you and I are. But appraisers younger than you and I are have heard this and say, well, no, I'm not going to do that. I am not going to learn how to do that. So, and maybe I painted a picture too dark. I'll concede that point. But given that potential, no, not potential, given that possible mindset, are we going to see a significant decrease in the number of appraisers? Because appraisers are simply not, or especially the old ones, are simply not going to learn how to use UAD3.
If what you say is happens in reality, and not to say that what you say is not true. My research so far, and it's still ongoing. I find that unconscionable if the appraisers are going to have to learn pivot tables, and the only pivot I know is in golf. The pivot tables and the things that are involved in learning how to fill out an Excel. my brother's a CPA, and when my Excel for my accounting goes bad, I send it back and say, you fix it, and he does. I will be one of the ones, mainly because it's just not, there are learning curves when you're 40, and there are learning curves when you're over 60. In learning curves when you're over 60, you have to sit down and go, I really don't need more of that. My understanding, and it's peripheral right now, is that the appraisal companies, the ACIs and the Alamos and the Bradfords and the Click Forms and all those are going to have the front end of that. So it might not be that when I open up the appraisal that I'll be looking at an Excel table. That might be buried somewhere inside. Now, whoever sees that and they go, Marty, you're full of, what, please call me. I'd love the research. And I think that's going to play a big part in not the delay, but in the time it's going to take to get this out to the appraisers. That's my take. And you and I had this conversation before, and we'll find out if the appraiser has to understand how to fill out or how to use Excel. That would be what I would call not progress. That Excel itself is almost older than any modernization we could do. The concept is there, but the appraisal companies. At first, when I heard this, I thought, oh my God, what are the ACIs and the Alamos? What are they going to do? And when you listen to some of the people who talk about this, they say, if you ask Fannie Mae, what's this going to look like for the appraiser? A lot of them will say, I don't know. This is how it's going to work internally, but we don't know what it's going to look like when it comes to you. And you and I will both sit back and watch it. And I do enough appraisals that it will affect me. I might do 2 or 3 a week, a couple a week, but I'm out there. You're right. I'm out, looking at carpeting and watching my step in the backyard, and doing everything that appraisers do. I still have winter boots. I did sell my snowshoes, so I'm not. If it's that, it's like golf. I sold my rain suit 20 years ago. If it's raining, I'm just not playing. That's so if the snow is 18 inches deep, I just won't take any assignment. That's the luxury that you have after 4 decades in the business. But if you put the way you describe it in front of the 80,000 or maybe the 16,000 practicing appraisers for the URAR, I agree with you. You're going to lose a lot of them, and you're going to lose a lot of them with the good experience, with 2 or 3 decades of experience who still want to stay in the business.
Okay. Let's take this one step further as we wrap up. If you're doing GSE work, then this, let's call it this dark scenario, is probably going to come true. In fact, it is going to come true. We just don't know when. Okay, so a appraiser says, all right, I'm going to quit doing GSA work, and I'm going to do divorce work and yellow book work and estate work and pre-listing work, and I'm going to learn how to measure by ANSI, and I'm going to do that for brokers and other appraisers. I'll even take pictures, and I'll even be a property data collector. Do you think that taking those steps, getting the education necessary to engage in those areas of real estate appraisal, is a viable alternative to giving up doing GSE work in the event that UAD3 is as dark as I have envisioned it?
Well, I keep harping on progress, and history defines progress, and we have to learn how to survive what really is progress and what really is not progress. So once we survive that, I have kind of a dark picture of that myself. Out of 150 appraisals I might do a year, maybe 10% of those, maybe 15% are for estates. I personally don't do divorce work, although I understand there's those who do it. There's a lot of it out there. But if the amount of appraisers get out of the GSE business into the different client business, whether that's estate or divorce or you know, investment planning, a lot of different things, it's going to take a lot fewer appraisers. That's all. It won't require the amount of appraisers we have. I think about 1,500 in Michigan. We could probably survive with half that if that's what happens. Florida has, I think, 5,000 or 6,000 residential appraisers.
Oh, I think it's got over 9,000, but that's general and residential. So yeah, probably about 6,000 residential.
Yeah, okay. And again, when you take off, so is it worth your while to expand? Absolutely. You know, but again, if everybody expands to it and you only have you know, you only have a product that's got you know, you're going to buy shoes and there are 80 pair of shoes and there are 300 people who want them, not all of them are going to get them. And so it's you know, the old adage of supply and demand. And we've talked about this before, is that when you, even your E&O will ask you how many of you know, is that, well, maybe they don't anymore, but they used to ask, you know, what percentage of your work comes from secondary mortgage work and what percentage comes from the other. And obviously they you know, they do that to see if you're, you know, if you're backstopped. Okay. You know, one of the things you do when you slow down and begin to retire is, rather than and this is a tip for those who are listening, rather than just take so many assignments from the 8 or 10 clients that you have, I picked a couple of clients that I knew I liked. The propensity for litigation was lower with these 2 clients. I picked these 2 clients. I take what they give, and when I'm not busy, I'm not busy. And that probably is the exact opposite of what you're taught to do when you start a business. Get as many clients as you can, which gives you longevity in the business. Not only clients, but estate work. You know, you talk to attorneys, you talk to clients. In my 4 decades in the business, I get a reasonable amount of people through name recognition. You know, can you do this for my, you know, for my estate? My mother died, my father died, you know. But to answer your question, the dark side of it is there's not enough, in my opinion. If there's an exodus, a mass exodus from doing mortgage appraisal work, there are too many appraisers to for the number of non-lending appraisals that are out there. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Oh, no, it makes sense. And you and I both are in agreement that with the passage of time, especially with the quote unquote modernization that you have addressed, there might not be a need for fewer appraisals, but there's probably going to be a need for fewer appraisers if the faster is better mantra holds true. So you and I both agree that if you're going to stay in this business, it's going to take an extension of what you've been doing in the past. In other words, if you're going to depend on the GSEs for 90% of your work, then you're either going to have to be incredibly good, or you're going to have to move into something else because the GSE work is just not going to be there.
Well, and right, what you say is very true. And the method that you use to do your GSE work, you go in the MLS, you go through showing time, you get, you know, it's a key box, you run into the property, you get in and out. Doing something for a divorce it's entirely different. Doing something for an estate is entirely different. You say, I'm going to be there at 9 o'clock on Thursday. They say, nah, sorry, I can't make it. Rather than telling the client, well, I'm sorry, that's all the time I got. you go, well, what time would you like me to look at it? It's just it's a whole different hand holding, a different concept, and it's extremely worthwhile. I enjoy all the non-lender work that I do. But as a basis, if 90% of your income comes from non-lender work, you have to be willing. It's kind of not really starting over again, but you have to be patient. To get out there and know how to solicit it. And before we leave, I don't want people to walk away with the idea that I'm against any changes. I'm all for the changes. I think the modernization concept in many of the forms that I've discussed is long overdue and well worth it. I don't believe categorically that taking the appraiser's eyes off of the collateral is the smartest thing to do. I think algorithms, I live in Michigan, in Detroit, in Dearborn, narrow subdivisions, algorithms would work, AVMs would work fine, particularly on a low loan to value and a high credit score. That, to me, that makes sense. It makes more sense. There are areas in the UP where I'm from that you should never loan on anything without having the appraiser go out there. But I think categorically, we can come together, and it is my hope that this will not be seen as progress, that certain things will be seen as progress, but the forward progress of taking the appraiser's eyes off it and putting somebody else's eyes on it. In our favorite program of Detective Bosch is saying, did you see the footage? Did you see the security cameras? Yes, I did. Did you see them? Because you watching what happens on the security cameras is much different than an analyst. To have the detective who has seen homicides and understands what nuances are. It's will it make it faster? I'm not sure. And if it's a move toward cheaper and faster, not all those moves work. So to me, I'm not on the fence. I just see some of this as progress, and some of it maybe history will say this really is not progress. And the price to be paid if it's not progress is dire. That's where I talked about the $13 trillion, and that 13 trillion, it was 11 something, I think, in 18 months ago. It might be 14 trillion now, but it's somewhere between 13 and 14 trillion. And if the stars line up again, like they did in 07, unemployment goes down, in all the signs point to, and property values go down, and we aren't secured well enough as a secondary mortgage market, the stakeholders will be you and I, and everybody who pays taxes. It will, the lenders, as we know, the lenders go out of business. So that's anyway, that is my view from 10,000 feet, that we are the stakeholders, and that's just, again, my opinion. So before we head off, I wanted to make sure everybody understands I'm not a gloom and doom person. I think we're going to get through this, and I think the concept of faster, we have the technology to do it, but we have to be vigilant that it's better and faster.
Marty, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you to follow up or ask you some more questions or seek your advice, etc., how would they go about doing that?
I'd prefer email. That's Marty, M-A-R-T-Y, at wagarappraisals.com. W-A-G-A-R, appraisals is plural.com. And I am always will always answer an email. I believe, like you do, that the decades in the business, it's time to give back, and we still have the wisdom to make sure that we don't make the same mistakes. And the saying is, if you don't remember history, you're doomed to repeat it. And I sure don't want to see that happen again. And when the meetings that you and I were in back in 07, 08, and the ones I was in, and you were in the business as well, maybe, during the S&L crisis, A lot of those people they have gone. They're in a different level. So when you look at the decisions being made, you want to ask, were you around in 07, 08? Do you know what a no doc loan is? Do we understand? One of the biggest things I think, and I say this in my in all the classes that I teach, one of the biggest aha moments maybe that the secondary mortgage market had was that the buyer can still give you his keys or her keys. They can have a good credit score, they can have money in the bank, they can be solvent, but they can say, here, it's not worth what it was before. Here's my keys. And that was something that you and I never saw prior to 2007. To declare bankruptcy, nobody ever did that. It was just the last resort. And after we got through 07 or 07, 08, declaring bankruptcy was just not, I don't want to say a big deal, but it was more accepted than it was.
Yeah, that was called a strategic, not just strategigic bankruptcy. Well, whatever it was. See, Marty, I'm getting old. Okay.
Well, yeah. And in your state, for instance, your state came out with that term where somebody lived across the street from a house they've always wanted, and they saw the house, going to foreclosure, and they went, "Oh, geez, this is great. I'm going to buy that one, and here, Fanny, you can have my keys." and that was that was a way of doing business, and they ended up with a house they always wanted for 40 cents on the dollar, and so they couldn't buy another house for 3 years. They could live with that, but they it was you're right, it was a strategic. I remember Florida had a term for it.
Strategic default.
Okay, yeah. And it was actually, you could, I don't want to, it wasn't a felony. It was a it was a, I don't want to say it was a crime, but it they knew what it was, and it started in Florida and California, California, Nevada, I think, were the three states that were seeing that. There's nothing wrong with the house the people lived in. They just saw something that that they've always wanted.
They walked away from A because they bought B. Yeah, they
Yeah.
bought B, as you said, 40 cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
So then they walked away from A. Yeah.
Yeah, and in 10 years, this is all going to be over, and this would have been a very good move.
Yeah. So since most people don't buy a house every 3 years,
Right.
it's really not that big a deal.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Marty, thank you. I appreciate your time, appreciate your wisdom. And I also forgot to say something, and I didn't want to omit this, but it was, I think 2 years ago that the National Association of Appraisers named you the Appraiser of the Year. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Nice of
And,
you.
you were genuinely surprised. I was at the meeting.
I
And
was.
you were genuinely surprised. Sometimes the recipient is notified in advance, so they, don't get drunk the night before, or they don't leave early or whatever. But no, that no, you were surprised.
2 minutes before they announced it, I was in the restroom. So I'm glad I came right back. I came right back to the meeting. Yes, I was surprised. A truly warm event. I still look back and smile.
It was well, they gave the award to the right person, Marty.
Thank you.
So again, thank you. And
you're very welcome.
For all of our viewers, thank you. Hit those like and subscribe buttons. And again, I'll like it if you subscribe. We'll be back with more movers and shakers in the real estate appraisal industry. This is Tim Andersen, and we're with Marty Wagar.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see y'all next time. Bye-bye now.